Hello everybody, today I want to show you some of the cool things that I found while creating this kick and bass. So as you can hear, this is quite a bit darker than the kick and basses that I normally use. In fact, this project is in the key of D, while I normally write in something like G sharp or even A sharp. So as a consequence of that darker key, our bass is also going to have a darker tone. And that is a little bit exaggerated with the way that this was made. Now this was actually made in an interesting way in that it's just a normal bass line. The reason why that is interesting for me is normally, as you guys know, I use wavetable basses. But for the experimentation that I wanted to do today, a normal bassline really worked better, because the main thing that I'm looking into today is this harmonic editor over here and how you can set up phases at the oscillator stage in order to do part of your processing. Because of course we all know what happens if you add a bunch of multiband plugins. So here we have M Dynamics MB, which is a multiband plugin. It's not doing anything in terms of the processing. We can disable this over here, but there's no need because it's set to a ratio of 1/1, so it's going to do no compression. We're just interested in the splitting of the frequencies and then summing them back together because of the phase shifting properties that you get from that. And to that similar vein, we have Vitamin over here. Now Vitamin is doing some actual processing over here. I decided for the first time ever to actually use the processing within Vitamin. But again, also over here, we are very interested in just setting the position of the filter so that we get a nice texture from the phase shift. And then as you can see, we have a little bit of EQing after that to just shape the tone. So in theory, this bass sound is very, very simple, right? It is just a saw wave. We have a slight change in the lowest fundamental over here in terms of the phase position. But other than that, it's just a saw wave going through your low pass filter, no effects whatsoever. We just have a volume modulation over here. And then we have our filter cutoff over here with this shape. And then of course we have our two plugins of processing over here and the EQing to gel it to the kick. But where the real magic comes in is if we take this bass line and we look a little bit more at the details. So what I really like about this bass line is that we have this kind of continuous tone coming out of the kick. You can hear in the lower harmonics that is really just kind of like a strong fundamental that seemingly sits throughout the whole beat. You kind of hear that nice humming sound that is something like that. And the way that we have achieved this is in two different ways. First of all, what I did in the resampling is I very deliberately wrote down the volume of this note over here to -6. So that's a little bit louder than what I would normally use, which was -8. That was back in the day when I used to do resampling. Of course, with my normal wavetable basslines, that is not something that I have to do. I'm not going to go in detail on that because there's so many videos on my channel that cover this topic, including my ultimate guide to kick and bass. What is important to know for now is that this note is a little bit louder at -6 than where it usually was. And that is going to mean that already the tonality of the bassline is going to come into the beat a little bit earlier than you would expect. Of course, this note is always there, it is always present, and you're always going to hear the click of it, unless you're talking about something like a galloping bassline, in this case. You can hear that distinct difference in the groove, but small changes to the volume can still have a massive impact on the groove, especially in the lower frequencies. It just keeps a little bit more power if this note is a little bit louder. Of course, there's plenty of things that you have to do in order to achieve that. One of those parts of the resampling is of course making sure that there's fades at the end so that the note kind of stops before the next transient plays. And another thing is that with the way that you set up your processing actually needs to sound nice in order for this to work. Another thing that is important is the phase alignment, and that is going to be the main topic of this video because I did something really cool here, which I've never seen anybody do. And that is phase aligning these bass notes to the kick. The way that I've done that is with a similar patch to my kick drum. So here we have our normal kick patch. I can just quickly go into it, but it's just a normal kick made in Audijack. And what I've done is I've made the exact same kick with the exact same envelope and the exact same pitch envelope over here, the exact same setting for the phase, and I've just made that a beat long. The way that you can do that, let's just duplicate this over. So this is our normal kick patch over here. We are going to set this to preserve, and then we can set it to a beat. And now in the envelope over here, we can remove these last few volume notes so that we just get a clean volume. And now you have just this kind of kick drum that continues throughout the whole beat and has the exact same phase as your main kick drum. So this kick, if we enable it, will show up in SideScope like this. I'm just gonna set this to layers because of course the summing now no longer makes sense. But in layers, we can see exactly what is happening here. Just gonna make this a little bit bigger. What we can see in terms of phase alignment is that our kick drum is actually aligned with our yellow kick drum over here, which is the copy that we made of it. We can see the red kick drum over here. So this is our main kick drum that is of course going down in volume at this part over here. But our alignment tool is right over here and you can see it shows up everywhere. Of course, this over here is the playback stop. The other part to note over here is that if we look throughout the whole waveform, including this bass note over here, we can see that our alignment tool kind of lines up with the zero crossings of each of the bass notes. Furthermore, this bass note in particular lines up pretty neatly with our extended kick drum here. You can see that this is phase aligned in the sense that both of them are going down, both of them are going up here. There is that little bit of a dip in here, but you can see that the lowest fundamental of this bass line is probably aligned with our kick drum over here. And this is what is responsible for that effect on the render of our bass line, which is just flipping the waveform upside down. You can just hear that when it's flipped upside down with this utility turned on, it is sounding much more powerful in the lowest frequencies. And I think that has to do with the fact that we have basically aligned this note over here to the kick drum, and therefore the sine wave kind of just continues. Now the illusion is broken apart a little bit towards the end here. As you can see, this one doesn't line up exactly. And to be honest, I think it is better to have your two bass notes identical than to have two bass notes with a different sine waves that line up like this. Of course, we can test that theory by rendering out another bass note. What I'm quickly going to do is duplicate over this track here and then delete the contents on it. We have this bass note over here. This is our main bass line that we can turn off temporarily. And then we can listen to this one. And in here, we can just make a version of that. This is why setting the phase over here is so important. If I just give myself enough real estate on the screen, what we can do is we can just make a version of that bass where this one is phase aligned. Maybe like this and then flipped on its head. Of course, gain separately. And then I want utility on the bass line so that I can flip it. Now let's just quickly record this bass note here. Like that. I'm going to add the fade, which for me is 1 section long in this grid size. Nice to have a standard in there. And then I'm just going to turn its volume up. And I'm just going to add it to the last note of this collection over here. So now we have a sine wave that is basically continuous throughout this whole thing, because it's always aligned with our lineup guide over here. Of course, let's switch this around to our main bass line. Now we have a little bit of an issue in that we're flipping this waveform upside down. So what is a better idea is to have this on a separate track and not flip it upside down. And just so that you guys can hear the difference, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make 2 beats over here of this new bass line, and then I'm going to make some beats of the old bass line as well, which is just on the inverted channel and just our original notes here. I can definitely hear a little bit of a difference. Right now, I would say that this first part over here, it feels like the bass line is a little bit more continuous, in fact, in the lowest frequencies. Whereas this part over here sounds more stable. I feel like there's a slight difference between the transients over here. And that probably just has to do with the fact that we did indeed shift that sub bass. That might lead to a slightly different peak value in here, meaning that this was normalized to a different volume. That could be the case, but it can also be the case that the processing was affected by our shift in the waveform. Either way, in this case, for this particular bassline, I'm probably going to stick with this idea over here. Just having the stable bass notes, in my opinion, sounds a little bit better. But as you can imagine, there's a lot that you can do with this technique. And now that there's a very easy way to render out your kick drum over a whole beat, it is easy to actually phase line against that. Overall, I just wanted to make this video to show you guys that. So that is everything that I wanted to show for you today. This is just a little trick that I found while I was actually experimenting with this new bassline for the start of a new track. I don't know exactly where this track is going to go. I have a few ideas for it in mind, but today I'm not going to be working on it anymore as I have some other videos to record as well. But either way, I hope you enjoyed this one. Let me know if you did by leaving a like and make sure that you're subscribed to the channel. Another way to support me is financially, which you can do on my Patreon page, where you'll get some awesome benefits in return, like early access to videos and discounts on my products. So if you're interested in that, there's a link on the end cards. But that's going to be it. Bye bye.